Many years ago, when I was a student in Britain, a friend of mine from the northern county of Derbyshire told me about Eyam, a village not far from where he grew up. As the 1665 plague swept England, this community quarantined itself. In 2014, my wife Connie and I were able to visit Eyam as part of my research on local responses to mass trauma. Particularly relevant to the pandemic in our time, the inspiring story which follows grew out of my study. In addition to farming, Eyam was a center of cottage industries, particularly those producing textiles. Unbeknownst to the villagers, a bundle of cloth infected with bubonic plague germs arrived in Eyam for processing. Walking down the streets of a now stunningly beautiful village, one is still reminded of the horror that beset it 3.5 centuries ago. The first death occurred in the house of Mary Hadfield, now known as the Plague Cottage. It was George Vickers who had received the bundle of infected cloth. 3 other people living in the house died. Only Mary survived, but she lost 13 other relatives, including her husband. In many houses, no one survived. Despite being theological opposites, 2 clergymen rallied the villagers and convinced them to isolate the area. One of them, the Reverend Thomas Stanley, died as a result. While sanitary conditions left much to be desired, people at that time had some knowledge of contagion. This is shown in the unique way in which the villagers got supplies from neighboring villages. The village has a wonderful little museum. I was able to meet the museum's director and a local historian, and joined a visiting group of school children on their tour. This allowed me to observe how Eyam's history is presented to the young. Amazingly accurate records were kept all those years ago. A couple years before, I had visited San Francisco to study its 1906 earthquake. Records were so poor that the true death toll will probably never be known. Yet centuries earlier, Eyam proved to be very different. Here are the complete records of everyone who died in each house. History's most famous pandemic was the Black Death of the mid-1300s. The plague which came to England in 1665 was one of many reverberations of this. Not having the benefit of later medical advances, we should not assume our forebears were ignorant. In many ways, large and small, historic pandemics have influenced our lives. How we use flowers, our nursery rhymes, even saying God bless you after someone sneezes, all came out of the plague. Probably the most visible legacy of the 17th century pandemic is the increasingly popular custom of well dressing. This involves decorating wells with ornate floral displays. Far from being relegated to obscurity, the experience of Eyam has continued significance, not just for those living in the shadow of the tragedy, but also for tens of thousands of visitors who annually come to experience the village's sacrifice. Religious motifs abound. The 100th anniversary of the First World War and the 200th anniversary of the abolition of the slave trade were remembered. Lighter memories are also featured.